Have you ever noticed that the deeper you plunge into your thoughts, the more you feel like a solitary island? The sharper your insights grow, the fewer ears seem open to them. This isn't a passing whim. It's a truth woven into society's core. Throughout history, those who ventured beyond the commonplace, thinkers like Hypatia, Da Vinci, Spinoza, or Woolf, weren't just ignored, but ridiculed, silenced, or shunned. Why? Not for any flaw in their brilliance, but because their clarity pierced the cozy fog most cling to. Even Schopenhauer, that unflinchingly raw philosopher, viewed intelligence as a double-edged blade, a gift that dooms its wielder to isolation for seeing the world too starkly. What is it about deep thinking that stirs such discomfort? Let's peel back the enigma. Reason 1. The mirror effect of intelligence. Why does society so often resist those who think differently? Why does this rejection persist across time and cultures? The answer lies buried within the intricate workings of human psychology, a realm where our reactions to others reveal more about ourselves than we might care to admit. Consider this everyday scenario. When you stand beside someone who is physically powerful, their strength doesn't inherently diminish you. You might admire their prowess, perhaps even feel inspired by it. Similarly, when you encounter someone wealthy, envy might stir within you, but it rarely feels like a personal assault. Their riches exist outside of you, a fact you can acknowledge without questioning your own worth. Yet something shifts dramatically when you meet someone whose intellect towers above your own. This is where a curious phenomenon, dubbed the mirror effect by psychologists, comes into play. A deep thinker doesn't merely present novel ideas, they unwittingly hold up a mirror, reflecting back the intellectual limitations of those around them. And that reflection stings. People don't easily forgive being made to feel less capable, even if the deep thinker remains silent, their mere presence a quiet indictment. But why does this discomfort arise so uniquely with intelligence, more so than with any other form of superiority? To unravel this, we must explore how our minds process different types of excellence. Physical strength, for instance, often evokes a primal respect. We might see the strong individual as a potential leader, a protector in times of need, someone whose abilities complement rather than compete with our own. Wealth, too, operates on a tangible plane. Its presence might spark ambition or jealousy, but it doesn't necessarily threaten the essence of who we are. Beauty, likewise, is an external trait. We can appreciate it or aspire to it without feeling our core identity is at stake. These qualities, strength, wealth, beauty, are outward-facing, attributes we can observe and even desire without them piercing the fabric of our self-concept. Intelligence, however, is a different beast entirely. It's not just a skill or a possession, it's the very lens through which we view the world, the foundation of our beliefs, our reasoning, our sense of self. When we encounter someone whose thoughts cut deeper, whose questions unravel the assumptions we hold dear, it's as though they've trespassed into the sanctum of our identity. This isn't merely discomfort. It can feel like an existential challenge, a silent accusation that our understanding is shallow or incomplete. This psychological dynamic explains why intelligence, unlike other superiorities, provokes such visceral resistance. When a deep thinker enters the room, their ability to see beyond the surface doesn't just introduce new perspectives, it forces others to confront their own intellectual boundaries. Most people don't respond with admiration, as they might to a muscular physique or a hefty bank account. Instead, they recoil, not because the thinker is boastful or condescending, but because their presence alone lays bare the gaps in others' comprehension. This is no small matter. Our egos, fragile as they are, govern much of our behavior. Humans are hardwired to protect their self-image, to shield themselves from anything that threatens their perceived competence. A deep thinker's insights don't just challenge ideas, they challenge the very egos tethered to those ideas. And rather than face that discomfort head-on, people push back, sometimes subtly, through dismissal or avoidance, and sometimes overtly, through ridicule or exclusion. This pattern isn't new. It's etched into the annals of history. Deep thinkers, philosophers, scientists, visionaries, have long been relegated to society's edges, not because their ideas lacked merit, but because they disrupted the comfortable status quo. Their clarity of thought didn't just question prevailing notions, it exposed the insecurities of those who clung to them. Take Socrates, who probed the unexamined beliefs of Athens, or Galileo, whose heliocentric truths upended centuries of doctrine. Their brilliance wasn't the problem. It was the unease they inspired in others. Human nature, it seems, will go to great lengths to avoid the mirror of self-reflection, even if that means silencing or shunning those who hold it up. In this light, the resistance to deep thinkers isn't mere stubbornness. It's a defense mechanism, a desperate bid to preserve the ego from the discomfort of its own limits. And so, the question lingers. If intelligence so often isolates, is it a gift to be celebrated or a burden to be borne? Perhaps it's both, but one thing is clear. Its power to unsettle is as old as humanity itself. Reason 2. Intelligence as a threat to ego. Reflect for a moment on your own life. Have you ever found yourself in a casual conversation, perhaps over coffee or at a social gathering, where you dared to introduce a thought-provoking or intricate idea, something that required a bit of mental effort to unpack, only to be greeted by blank stares, uneasy silence, or a quick pivot to a lighter topic? Maybe you've noticed how swiftly people steer discussions back to the safety of small talk, weather updates, weekend plans, or the latest trending show, whenever the dialogue ventures beyond the shallow end. This isn't a random occurrence or mere social awkwardness. It's a deeply ingrained defense mechanism at work. When confronted with a deep thinker, someone who probes beneath the surface, most people's minds instinctively shift into self-preservation mode. Rather than leaning into curiosity or embracing the chance to explore uncharted intellectual territory, they pull back. Instead of engaging with the idea, they deflect or dismiss it outright, often without even realizing why. This reaction explains why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries so frequently find themselves on the outskirts of social circles. It's not that they crave solitude or deliberately set out to alienate themselves. Rather, society subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, forces them into isolation. Their tendency to question assumptions, to peel back layers of accepted norms, makes others uncomfortable, and that discomfort breeds distance. What's fascinating, though, is how research backs this up. Studies consistently reveal that in social settings, confidence often trumps intelligence in the popularity stakes. People are magnetically drawn to those who exude certainty, those bold, unwavering voices that project assurance, even if their ideas lack depth or originality. Think of the charismatic friend who dominates a room with simple, feel-good proclamations, or the colleague who wins over the team with decisive sound bites rather than nuanced reasoning. These individuals thrive because their straightforwardness feels safe and accessible, requiring little effort from their audience. Contrast that with the deep thinker, whose words often carry shades of complexity and ambiguity. Their insights demand active listening and critical reflection, mental labor that many are unwilling to invest. History offers a treasure trove of examples to illustrate this divide. Populist leaders, from ancient demagogues to modern politicians, have long mastered the art of rallying crowds with emotionally charged, easy-to-digest rhetoric, sidestepping the messiness of critical thought. Motivational speakers fill auditoriums by delivering uplifting platitudes that soothe rather than challenge. Viral influencers, too, skyrocket to fame by crafting snappy, relatable content that hooks attention without taxing the mind. Meanwhile, those who dare to question the status quo whether it's a scientist debunking a cherished myth or a philosopher exposing the flaws in conventional wisdom, often find themselves preaching to a sparse choir. Their audience remains small not because their ideas lack merit, but because they ask people to confront uncomfortable truths, a task the majority instinctively avoids. This dynamic creates what we might call the paradox of intelligence. The deeper someone dives into the pursuit of truth, the more they drift from the mainstream current. It's not just that their ideas are hard to grasp, it's that their very presence acts as a mirror, reflecting back the intellectual limits of those around them. This mirror effect doesn't merely expose society's blind spots. It lays bare the root of its resistance to change. People cling to familiar beliefs and routines because they provide stability, a psychological anchor in an unpredictable world. When a deep thinker comes along, offering a perspective that upends that comfort, it's not just the idea that's rejected, it's the threat to the fragile equilibrium of the group. Over time, this pushback becomes a pattern. Society celebrates simplicity and certainty in the moment, while the slow, transformative work of deep thought is left to simmer on the margins, often appreciated only in retrospect. This tension isn't new. It's a thread woven through human history, revealing why progress so often comes at the cost of the thinker's isolation. Reason 3. Neuroscience and the fear response. Reflect for a moment on your own life. Have you ever found yourself in a casual conversation, perhaps over coffee or at a social gathering, where you dared to introduce a thought-provoking or intricate idea, something that required a bit of mental effort to unpack, only to be greeted by blank stares, uneasy silence, or a quick pivot to a lighter topic? Maybe you've noticed how swiftly people steer discussions back to the safety of small talk, weather updates, weekend plans, or the latest trending show, whenever the dialogue ventures beyond the shallow end. This isn't a random occurrence or mere social awkwardness. It's a deeply ingrained defense mechanism at work. When confronted with a deep thinker, someone who probes beneath the surface, most people's minds instinctively shift into self-preservation mode. Rather than leaning into curiosity or embracing the chance to explore uncharted intellectual territory, they pull back. Instead of engaging with the idea, they deflect or dismiss it outright, often without even realizing why. This reaction explains why intellectuals, philosophers, and visionaries so frequently find themselves on the outskirts of social circles. It's not that they crave solitude or deliberately set out to alienate themselves. Rather, society subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, forces them into isolation. Their tendency to question assumptions, to peel back layers of accepted norms, makes others uncomfortable, and that discomfort breeds distance. What's fascinating, though, is how research backs this up. Studies consistently reveal that in social settings, confidence often trumps intelligence in the popularity stakes. People are magnetically drawn to those who exude certainty, those bold, unwavering voices that project assurance, even if their ideas lack depth or originality. Think of the charismatic friend who dominates a room with simple, feel-good proclamations, or the colleague who wins over the team with decisive sound bites rather than nuanced reasoning. These individuals thrive because their straightforwardness feels safe and accessible, requiring little effort from their audience. Contrast that with the deep thinker, whose words often carry shades of complexity and ambiguity. Their insights demand active listening and critical reflection, mental labor that many are unwilling to invest. History offers a treasure trove of examples to illustrate this divide. Populist leaders, from ancient demagogues to modern politicians, have long mastered the art of rallying crowds with emotionally charged, easy-to-digest rhetoric, sidestepping the messiness of critical thought. Motivational speakers fill auditoriums by delivering uplifting platitudes that soothe rather than challenge. Viral influencers, too, skyrocket to fame by crafting snappy, relatable content that hooks attention without taxing the mind. Meanwhile, those who dare to question the status quo, whether it's a scientist debunking a cherished myth or a philosopher exposing the flaws in conventional wisdom, often find themselves preaching to a sparse choir. Their audience remains small, not because their ideas lack merit, but because they ask people to confront uncomfortable truths, a task the majority instinctively avoids. This dynamic creates what we might call the paradox of intelligence. The deeper someone dives into the pursuit of truth, the more they drift from the mainstream current. It's not just that their ideas are hard to grasp, it's that their very presence acts as a mirror, reflecting back the intellectual limits of those around them. This mirror effect doesn't merely expose society's blind spots, it lays bare the root of its resistance to change. People cling to familiar beliefs and routines because they provide stability, a psychological anchor in an unpredictable world. When a deep thinker comes along, offering a perspective that upends that comfort, it's not just the idea that's rejected, it's the threat to the fragile equilibrium of the group. Over time, this pushback becomes a pattern. Society celebrates simplicity and certainty in the moment, while the slow, transformative work of deep thought is left to simmer on the margins, often appreciated only in retrospect. This tension isn't new. It's a thread woven through human history, revealing why progress so often comes at the cost of the thinker's isolation. Reason 4. Group dynamics amplify rejection. Have you ever wondered why a brilliant idea can be celebrated in private, but dismissed in a crowd? The question persists. If intelligence feels so threatening, is there concrete evidence that people fear it, especially in group settings? Modern neuroscience provides a compelling answer. Research reveals that when individuals perceive themselves as intellectually outmatched, their brain's amygdala, the region tied to fear and threat detection, lights up with activity. This isn't just a mild unease, it's a primal survival response, akin to the panic triggered by a physical danger lurking in the shadows. But why does intelligence, something abstract, provoke the same fear circuits as a tangible threat? The explanation lies deep within the evolution of the human brain, shaped by millennia of tribal living where group dynamics reigned supreme. For most of human history, survival hinged not on being the cleverest individual, but on securing a place within the tribe. Our ancestors relied on social harmony for protection. Rejection from the group often spelled death, leaving the outcast exposed to predators or starvation. Consequently, our brains evolved to prioritize social acceptance over intellectual brilliance. When a highly intelligent person steps into a social setting, their presence can subtly, or not so subtly, upset this ancient balance. Their unconventional ideas, sharp observations, or tendency to question norms don't just challenge the status quo. They disrupt the unspoken rules that hold groups together. This disturbance triggers the brain's defense mechanism, registering the deep thinker as a potential threat, much like an outsider encroaching on tribal territory. In group contexts, this rejection intensifies. Imagine a workplace meeting where one person proposes a radical, well-thought-out solution. While it might earn quiet respect in a one-on-one chat, the same idea can spark discomfort or hostility among colleagues vying for social standing. Why? Because groups amplify the stakes of comparison. The intelligent individual's presence doesn't just highlight their own insight, it casts a shadow on others' perceived competence, threatening their position in the pecking order. Neuroscience supports this. Studies show that the amygdala's fear response spikes more dramatically in group settings than in isolated encounters. This is why many deep thinkers feel isolated, not due to poor social skills, but because their intelligence marks them as outliers in a world that prizes conformity over distinction. Consider a practical example. A classroom where a student consistently asks probing questions. In a private discussion, the teacher might admire their curiosity, but in front of peers, the same student risks eye rolls or exclusion. Group dynamics punish those who stand out. Over time, this rejection can wear on deep thinkers, reinforcing their sense of alienation. Yet it's not just about fear. It's about survival instincts clashing with modern social structures. In a tribe, the disruptive thinker might have been sidelined to preserve unity. Today, that same wiring drives people to dismiss or resent those whose intellect challenges the comfort of the collective. Thus, the isolation of deep thinkers isn't a personal failing. It's a byproduct of a brain built to favor fitting in over forging new paths. Reason 5. The digital age amplifies shallow thinking. In today's hyper-connected world, the digital age has intensified society's preference for shallow thinking over intellectual depth, a phenomenon starkly illustrated by a 2021 Stanford University study. This research revealed a shocking insight. The perception of deep thinkers is highly context-dependent. In one-on-one interactions, people tend to feel less threatened by intellectual superiority, often finding it intriguing or even inspiring. However, in group settings, whether online forums, social media threads, or virtual meetings, the threat response escalates dramatically. Why does this shift occur? The answer lies in the heightened importance of social status in collective environments, a dynamic turbocharged by digital platforms. People don't merely react to intelligence itself. They respond to how it positions them relative to others in the eyes of the group. When a deep thinker's insights outshine their peers, it sparks insecurity, prompting instinctive efforts to undermine or exclude them to safeguard their own standing. This explains why profound conversations often thrive in private messages or intimate exchanges, but falter in the noisy, competitive arenas of large social networks. The digital landscape amplifies this rejection further through its design and culture. Social media algorithms prioritize quick, emotionally charged content. Think viral memes or outrage bait over nuanced, thought-provoking ideas that demand time and reflection. As a result, deep thinkers struggle to gain traction in spaces where attention spans are short and engagement trumps substance. Psychologists point to several cognitive biases that compound this resistance, each exacerbated by the online echo chambers of the digital age. Take the Dunning-Kruger effect. Individuals with limited knowledge frequently overestimate their competence, a tendency magnified when they can broadcast their opinions to millions with a single click. Meanwhile, highly intelligent people, prone to self-doubt, hesitate to oversimplify their ideas for mass appeal, creating a disconnect. This friction is palpable on platforms like X, where confident but shallow takes often drown out careful reasoning. Then there's the status quo bias, which thrives in the digital era's curated feeds. The human brain naturally gravitates toward familiar, comfortable ideas, and online systems reinforce this by serving users content that aligns with their existing views. Deep thinkers who often introduce complex or disruptive truths clash with this preference, making their contributions feel jarring or unwelcome. Finally, the backfire effect adds another layer of resistance. When confronted with ideas that challenge their beliefs, say, a well-reasoned post debunking a popular myth, people don't reconsider. They dig in deeper, especially when their stance is publicly tied to their online identity. In the fast-paced, performative world of social media, where likes and retweets signal approval, deep thinkers face an uphill battle. Their challenging ideas don't just disrupt conversations. They threaten the fragile digital egos built on followers and validation. Thus, the digital age not only amplifies shallow thinking, but also systematically sidelines those who dare to think beyond the surface. Reason 6. Schopenhauer's philosophy of intelligence as a curse. What does it mean to be a deep thinker in a world that often seems to reject those who ponder too deeply? For those who wrestle with complex ideas and seek truth beyond the surface, the experience can feel isolating. And this isn't just a fleeting emotion. The rejection of intelligence isn't merely a social phenomenon. It's deeply rooted in biology, psychology, and culture, woven into the fabric of human nature itself. Group dynamics amplify this resistance, and modern technology, with its preference for quick, shallow content, only magnifies the divide. Yet, this doesn't mean deep thinkers should silence their voices or abandon their pursuit of understanding. Instead, they must recognize the powerful forces at play, forces that push back against their insights, and learn to navigate them with care. If society so often resists intelligence, what does it embrace instead? The answer lies in comfort, a predictable, unchallenged existence where truth takes a back seat to ease. One philosopher who understood this tension profoundly was Arthur Schopenhauer, a thinker renowned for his unflinching honesty. Unlike others who celebrated intelligence as a path to triumph, Schopenhauer saw it as a curse, a burden that sets the intelligent apart from the crowd. But what makes intelligence such a heavy load to bear? At the heart of his philosophy lies the concept of the will, a blind, irrational force driving human behavior. For Schopenhauer, most people are guided by the will to live, chasing pleasure, comfort, and survival without questioning deeper realities. In contrast, highly intelligent individuals are driven by what could be called the will to truth, an unrelenting need to peel back the layers of existence, even when the revelations bring discomfort or alienation. This fundamental difference creates a chasm between the majority and the intellectual minority. Ordinary people, Schopenhauer argued, find fulfillment in everyday joys, relationships, entertainment, and familiar routines. Deep thinkers, however, often see these as fleeting distractions, masking life's more troubling questions. The more they grasp the complexities of human nature, its contradictions, deceptions, and hidden motives, the harder it becomes to connect with others. Social interactions, often filled with small talk, status games, and polite half-truths, feel shallow to those who crave authenticity. Where most prefer simplicity, deep thinkers hunger for depth, leaving them restless in a world that rarely accommodates such desires. Moreover, they see through the illusions of ambition, money, power, relationships that captivate the majority, questioning their worth and meaning. This detachment can make them seem aloof or unrelatable, widening the gap further. This disconnection explains why intelligent individuals frequently feel misunderstood, alienated, or even resented. Their very presence shines a light on truths others would rather ignore, stirring unease without a single word spoken. Schopenhauer likened intelligence to a heightened awareness, a gift that doubles as a curse. He famously wrote, "A high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial," a simple yet piercing observation. The more you comprehend, the less you can overlook. The more you see the world's flaws, the harder it is to find peace within it. For Schopenhauer, intelligence and happiness pull in opposite directions. Ignorance, he claimed, is the real foundation of contentment. History bears this out. Thinkers like Nietzsche, Pascal, and Kafka, brilliant as they were, often grappled with depression, existential dread, and isolation. Yet Schopenhauer didn't merely lament this fate. He offered practical ways to endure it. First, he urged deep thinkers to embrace solitude, not as a penalty, but as a sanctuary, a space for intellectual and creative growth free from society's demands. Second, he encouraged them to seek out kindred spirits, whether through the pages of books, philosophical discourse, or rare communities of like-minded souls, rather than forcing themselves into a world that doesn't fit. Finally, he advised a measured engagement with society. Observe its rhythms, understand its limits, and share insights selectively with those ready to hear them. These strategies remain a lifeline for today's deep thinkers facing rejection. Intelligence may isolate, but it also bestows freedom, wisdom, and a richer grasp of life's mysteries. Schopenhauer saw it as a double-edged sword. painful yet empowering, distancing yet illuminating. Ultimately, his philosophy reveals a stark truth. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself, but the unsettling clarity it brings. Reason 7. Historical examples of rejected thinkers. Throughout history, society has shown a peculiar tendency to resist those who think deeply, not out of disdain for their intelligence, but because of the unsettling truths they uncover. Society doesn't fear intelligence itself, it fears what intelligence reveals. Deep thinkers aren't rejected because their ideas are flawed. They're dismissed because they're right too soon, exposing realities that others aren't ready to face. If you've ever felt isolated in your thoughts, wrestling with insights that seem to set you apart, take heart. You're not broken. You're simply perceiving the world as it truly is, unfiltered by the comforting illusions many prefer. But this raises a pressing question. Are deep thinkers destined to live in solitude, or can they find ways to navigate a society that resists their intellectual depth? The reality is stark. Society isn't designed to embrace those who probe beneath the surface. It's structured to preserve stability, favoring predictability over the disruptions that truth often brings. Most people gravitate toward comfort rather than the unease of challenging ideas, which is why shallow conversations, oversimplified concepts, and repetitive, unchallenging content dominate our social spaces. But why does this preference for comfort outweigh the pursuit of intellectual depth? Why does society cling to the familiar, even when change driven by insight could lead to progress? The answer lies in the intricate wiring of human psychology and the way our institutions mold our thinking from the earliest stages of life. At its core, the human brain is engineered to seek certainty and avoid mental strain, a tendency psychologists term cognitive ease. This means the mind naturally prefers information that's simple and familiar, requiring minimal effort to process. Complex, nuanced, or unfamiliar ideas, by contrast, register as taxing, sometimes even threatening, prompting resistance rather than curiosity. This psychological inclination is compounded by what's known as system justification theory, which reveals why people defend the status quo, even when it's flawed or works against their own interests. Rather than questioning outdated beliefs or entrenched authority, most rationalize them, finding safety in the known rather than risking the uncertainty of change. Groupthink further entrenches this pattern. Individuals conform to widely accepted views, shunning intellectual dissent to avoid social rejection. This explains why the majority often pushes back against those who challenge norms, even when their arguments are grounded in reason and evidence. Such a deep-seated preference for comfort over complexity is precisely why intellectuals, philosophers, and scientists struggle to gain widespread acceptance during their lifetimes. Their ideas disrupt the cozy equilibrium society works to maintain. Consider the digital landscape today as a magnifying glass on this phenomenon. On social media, who commands the most attention? Not the intellectuals wrestling with intricate truths, but those who distill messy realities into catchy, feel-good sound bites that spread like wildfire. Thought-provoking discussions falter because depth demands time and reflection, while viral content thrives on immediacy, emotion, and digestibility. Algorithms amplify this divide, prioritizing engagement over substance. Controversy, outrage, and humor outpace reasoned discourse every time. This creates echo chambers where people cocoon themselves in ideas that reinforce what they already believe, growing ever more hostile to perspectives that dare to differ. In such an environment, deep thinkers who question the mainstream narrative often find themselves sidelined, misunderstood, or outright vilified. This rejection of intellectual rigor isn't confined to the online world. It's rooted in the very institutions that shape us, schools, workplaces, and politics. Education systems profess to champion intelligence, yet they often reward compliance over independent thought. Students who memorize and repeat thrive, while those who probe or defy authority are branded troublemakers. In workplaces, the corporate machine rarely elevates the most innovative minds. It favors those who blend into the culture and uphold existing power dynamics. Politically, leaders who deliver bold, logical truths often lose ground to those who pander with crowd-pleasing platitudes. This pattern reveals why history's most revered intellectuals, thinkers like Galileo, Van Gogh, and Tesla, were outcasts in their own time. Their ideas were disruptive, not digestible, and society only lauds them in retrospect, once their insights pose no threat. Take Galileo, imprisoned for proving the Earth orbits the Sun, now hailed as a scientific titan. Van Gogh, who died penniless, commands millions for his canvases today. Tesla, a visionary of free energy, faded into obscurity while his ideas were pilfered by profiteers. These stories underscore a harsh truth. Society doesn't welcome intelligence that challenges the norm. It celebrates it only when the dust settles and the risk is gone. So what hope is there for deep thinkers struggling for acceptance? You're not alone if you felt this sting of misunderstanding. History brims with brilliant minds: Socrates, Nietzsche, Turing, Hypatia, who were mocked, persecuted, or ignored in their day. Their crime? Being ahead of their time. Socrates died for urging critical thought, Galileo for unveiling cosmic truth, Tesla for dreaming beyond profit. Each paid a price for their wisdom, proving society doesn't dread intelligence. It dreads the change it heralds. The question lingers: how can today's deep thinkers endure this resistance and still thrive? Reason 8. Strategies for deep thinkers to navigate society. If history consistently demonstrates that society resists deep thinkers, pushing them to the margins for daring to challenge norms or see beyond the ordinary, what can you do if you find yourself among them? Are you, as someone who ponders life's complexities, inevitably destined for a lonely existence, misunderstood and isolated? Far from it. The truth is, being a deep thinker doesn't doom you to solitude. It simply requires you to approach the world with a blend of wisdom and strategy. The key lies in recognizing that not every environment or individual is equipped to handle the weight of profound ideas. People often prefer the comfort of familiar, surface-level exchanges over the discomfort of grappling with uncharted intellectual territory. So rather than casting your deepest thoughts into spaces where they'll be met with indifference or resistance, reserve them for those rare souls who genuinely value and seek depth. You don't need the approval or understanding of millions to thrive as a deep thinker, just a handful of kindred spirits who resonate with your perspective. These connections might not always be found in your immediate surroundings, but they're out there, waiting to be discovered. Seek them out deliberately, whether through the timeless wisdom of books written by history's great minds, the vibrant discussions in online communities dedicated to critical thought, or the intimate gatherings of intellectual circles where ideas are celebrated rather than feared. History shows us that deep thinkers like Socrates or Nietzsche didn't win over the masses in their lifetimes, yet they found solace and purpose in the pursuit of truth and the company of those who dared to question alongside them. Moreover, consider how the most impactful thinkers in history didn't just retreat into isolation, they adapted. They learned to bridge the gap between their inner world and the society around them. Take Albert Einstein's timeless advice: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. This isn't about dumbing down your ideas, but about mastering the art of communication. Deep thinkers can cultivate the skill of distilling complex concepts into accessible insights, inviting others in rather than overwhelming them. It's a practical way to share your depth without alienating those who might otherwise turn away. For instance, a scientist explaining a groundbreaking theory to a curious friend doesn't start with equations. They begin with a story or analogy that sparks interest. Schopenhauer, a philosopher who understood the burden of intellect, once wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." As a deep thinker, you possess this rare ability to perceive what others overlook. And while that vision sets you apart, it's also your strength. Yes, it may unsettle some. Your clarity might expose their blind spots or challenge their certainties, but that doesn't mean you should dim your light or silence your mind. Society may not always know how to embrace you, but it undeniably relies on people like you to push boundaries and drive progress. Think of Galileo, who faced imprisonment for his truths, or Tesla, whose innovations were dismissed until they reshaped the world. Their legacies prove that deep thinking, though often unappreciated in the moment, plants seeds for a better future. Navigating this reality means accepting that discomfort is part of the journey, but it's not the whole story. You can choose when and where to engage, preserving your energy for moments that matter. It's about balance, knowing when to speak, when to listen, and when to step back. You might find, for example, that a casual chat at a social gathering isn't the place for existential debates, but a quiet coffee with a thoughtful friend could spark a conversation that lingers for days. By being selective and intentional, you protect your intellectual fire while still finding ways to connect. Society needs deep thinkers, even if it struggles to admit it. Your role isn't to force acceptance, but to persist in seeing the world as it could be, and to share that vision with those ready to see it too. So if you've ever felt like an outsider because of the way you think, take heart. You're not alone. Throughout history, deep thinkers have walked a solitary path, misunderstood in their time yet celebrated long after. It's a bittersweet truth. While society might fear or resist those who see beyond the surface, it's precisely these minds that propel humanity forward, challenging us to grow, innovate, and confront the uncomfortable realities we'd rather ignore. You're part of that legacy, whether you realize it or not. If these ideas struck a chord with you, let's keep the conversation alive. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been dismissed or isolated for thinking too deeply? How did it feel, and how did you handle it? Your experiences matter, and I'd love to hear them. Better yet, let's build a community of curious minds right here. If you're hungry for more insights from history's greatest thinkers, those who dared to question, create, and endure, hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey. We're just scratching the surface, and there's so much more to explore together.